house stands as a static coordinate in the collective memory of the American Midwest. 1717 East Delmar Street. In the daylight of 1992, it was merely a small, single-story residence with white siding and a manicured lawn, indistinguishable from the suburban sprawl of Springfield, Missouri. But if we view this location through the lens of data and disappearance, it transforms into a sealed chamber. It is a locked room mystery where the room was unlocked, and the mystery lies not in what was left behind, but in the absolute, deafening silence of what was taken. June 7th, 1992. The atmosphere in the Ozarks is heavy, holding the humidity of early summer. It is a season of transition. For the students of Kickapoo High School, it is the bridge between adolescence and adulthood. Graduation day. The air is filled with the static of social rituals, gowns, photographs, the clinking of glasses, and the shifting logistics of after-parties. Among the graduates are Suzie Streeter and Stacy McCall. Susan, 19, and Stacy, 18, are navigating the chaotic joy of the night. Susan's mother, Sherrill Levitt, 47, is at the house on East Delmar. She is the anchor in this narrative, the figure resting at the center of the web. She speaks with a friend on the telephone around 11:15 p.m. She is painting an armoire. She is normal. She is planning to read a book and go to sleep. This is the baseline. This is the control group of reality before the anomaly occurs. The timeline of the disappearance is a fragmentation of logic. We can track the movement of the two younger women with precision until the early hours of the morning. They leave a party in Battlefield. They decide last minute not to stay at a friend's house in created anticipation of a trip to a water park the next day. They choose instead to return to Susan's home, to Sherrill's home on East Delmar. They drive separate cars. They arrive in a convoy of youth and exhaustion. It is approximately 2:15 in the morning. This is where the signal terminates. From 2:15 a.m. to approximately 8 a.m., the house on East Delmar becomes a black box. We have no telemetry. We have no audio recordings. We have only the physical arrangement of objects in space, frozen in a tableau that suggests a sudden, surgical removal of human life. Let us examine the scene as it was found, not by law enforcement initially, but by the friends who arrived the next morning, expecting a trip to a water park. The first anomaly is the silence. When Janelle Kirby and her boyfriend arrive around 9 a.m., the house is dormant. The cars are present. Suzanne's red Ford Escort and Stacy's Toyota Corolla are parked in the circular drive. They are positioned correctly. There are no skid marks, no signs of a hasty arrival. The physics of the scene imply a calm return. Janelle approaches the front door. It is unlocked. In the study of home invasions and abductions, the threshold is usually the site of violence. Splintered wood, shattered glass, the debris of resistance. Here, the threshold is fluid. The door opens without protest. The house accepts the visitors, just as it must have accepted the intruder. Inside, the sensory details create a cognitive dissonance. The visual input suggests the occupants are present, yet the audio input is absolute zero. The television is not blaring static. The coffee pot is not boiling over, but there is a disruption. The globe of the front porch light is shattered. This is the first glitch in the matrix of the scene. The bulb itself is intact and screwed into the socket, but the glass enclosure meant to protect it lies in shards on the porch floor. Later analysis would suggest someone unscrewed the bulb to darken the entry, accidentally dropping the globe. Or perhaps they shattered it intentionally to test the reaction of those inside. It is a detail of calculated stealth, a predator adjusting the environment to suit their needs. Janelle and her boyfriend enter the living room. They are looking for Stacy and Suzie. They assume the girls are sleeping. They assume Sherrill is asleep. They encounter the dog, a Yorkshire Terrier named Cinnamon. In the lore of high strangeness, the reaction of animals is often the only barometer for the supernatural or the terrifyingly human. Cinnamon is agitated. The small dog is leaping, anxious, vibrating with a nervous energy that contradicts the stillness of the home. The dog does not bark at the newcomers. It acts as if it has been traumatized by a presence that has since evaporated. Janelle walks through the house. The geography of the disappearance begins to take shape. She finds the purses. This is the detail that chills the blood of any investigator. In the hallway, sitting on the floor, are 3 purses. Sherrill's, Susan S., Stacy's. They are lined up. They are not thrown. They are placed. Inside the bags, the architecture of their lives remains intact. Cigarettes, lighter, keys, makeup, cash, the vital tethering devices of the modern world are all present. No woman leaves her home for an extended period without her purse. No woman leaves her home voluntarily without her keys or cigarettes. To leave all 3 behind, lined up like ritual objects, suggests an interruption so total that the concept of future needs, money, transport, nicotine, was rendered obsolete in an instant. Janelle moves to the bedrooms. The beds have been slept in. The sheets are pulled back, the pillows compressed. This suggests the timeline advanced further than the arrival. They came home. They prepared for bed. They entered the state of vulnerability that sleep demands. In Sherrill's room, A book lies on the nightstand. Her glasses and a pack of cigarettes are there. The water in the bathroom sink might have been used to wash off makeup. Washcloths are damp. The mundane rituals of the night were completed. The intrusion did not happen upon arrival. It happened during the deep quiet. The strangeness escalates when we consider the clothing. Stacy McCall's flowered shorts are found, but her jewelry is placed on the nightstand. The clothes the girls had worn to the graduation parties are accounted for. This implies they had changed. But into what? There is no clear inventory of missing garments, only the absence of the bodies that should be wearing them. The house is a vacuum. Janelle, in the innocence of youth, does not yet understand she is walking through a crime scene. She assumes the women have gone out for a walk, perhaps leaving the purses behind by mistake, however unlikely that seems. She sits down. The telephone rings. This moment is the most haunting data point in the initial timeline. It is the collision of the external world with the sealed reality of the house. Janelle answers. On the other end, a male voice. The descriptions of this call vary in their specific phrasing, but the tone is consistent. Lewd, aggressive, strain, sexual innuendo, delivered with a cold detachment. Janelle hangs up. The phone rings again. The same voice, the same heavy, intrusive energy. She hangs up again. In the chaos of the morning, a critical error occurs, a technological tragedy that rivals the physical disappearance. Janelle notices the answering machine light is blinking. A message has been left, a digital footprint from the time of the void. In a sequence of events that can only be described as a catastrophic accident, the message is played, and then, in the confusion, deleted. We must pause here to appreciate the gravity of this loss. In 1992, the answering machine tape was the only black box recorder available for a private residence. That message, whatever it contained, a threat, a breath, a background noise, a timestamp, was scrubbed from existence. It is a ghost transmission, heard by ears that did not know what they were listening to, and then erased into the magnetic ether. Later, Stacy's mother, Janice McCall, arrives. She has not heard from her daughter. The anxiety begins to curdle into dread. She enters the house. She sees the purses. She sees the damp towels. She sees the agitated dog. She walks into the bedroom and touches the sheets. They are cool. The heat of the bodies has dissipated hours ago. The women are simply gone. There is no blood. There is no sign of a struggle. A lampshade is slightly askew, but nothing is overturned. There are no bullet holes, no drag marks on the carpet, no forced entry at the windows. It is as if the roof of the house was lifted off by a silent hand. The three women plucked from their beds, and the roof replaced without shaking the dust from the shelves. The level of control required to subdue 3 adults, one 47, too young and athletic, without a sound, without a fight, without leaving a trace of biological evidence, is inconsistent with a chaotic burglary or a crime of passion. It suggests a command presence. It suggests a weapon that ensures silence, or it suggests a familiarity that disarmed their instincts until it was too late. By the time the police are formally notified, the scene has been contaminated. Friends have walked through the rooms. They have cleaned up shattered glass on the porch, thinking they were being helpful. They have answered the phone. They have deleted the message. The timeline is severed. The house on East Delmar sits in the afternoon sun of June 7th, 1992. The investigation is about to begin, but the event itself, the incident, is already over. It is left behind a hollow shell, a puzzle with no edges. Sherrill Levitt, Suzie Streeter, Stacy McCall. They are not dead. They are not alive. They are suspended in the amber of this moment. They have become the Springfield 3, and the silence they left behind is louder than any scream. As the sun sets on that first day, the true horror sets in. The realization that safety is an illusion, that locks do not matter, that 3 women can vanish from the center of a populated neighborhood, and the only witness is a small, trembling dog and a porch light with a broken globe. The glitch is permanent. The system has crashed, and we are left staring at the empty screen. Part 2. The context. To understand the disappearance of the Springfield 3, we must first understand the world they inhabited. We must strip away the modern lens of ubiquitous surveillance, GPS tracking, and instant communication. We have to step back into the analog twilight of 1992. This was a transitional era, a liminal space in history where the digital age was visible on the horizon, but had not yet arrived to illuminate the dark corners of American suburbia. June 7th, 1992. This date places us in a specific technological vacuum. The internet existed, but only as a text-based curiosity for academics and hobbyists. Cellular phones were bricks, reserved for stockbrokers and emergencies, certainly not carried in the purses of high school graduates. If you left your home, you vanished from the grid. You became unreachable until you physically arrived at another location with a landline. This silence, this disconnection, was considered normal. It was freedom. But in the context of this case, that freedom looks terrifyingly like vulnerability. Springfield, Missouri, sits in the heart of the Ozarks. It is often called the Queen City, a hub of commerce and education, surrounded by a landscape that is both beautiful and treacherous. Geologically, This is karst country. The ground beneath Springfield is a honeycomb of soluble rock, riddled with sinkholes, aquifers, and vast cavern systems. It is a landscape that swallows things. It is a place where the surface does not always reveal the depth of the hollows beneath. Culturally, Springfield in the early 90s was the buckle of the Bible Belt. It projected an image of wholesome Midwestern safety. It was a place where doors were often left unlocked, where neighbors knew neighbors, and where the violent crime rates of coastal cities felt like distant fiction. However, Springfield was also a crossroads. It sits on the path of historic Route 66 and Interstate 44. It is a transient corridor, a place where people pass through, stop for a night, and move on. This creates a friction between the static, rooted local population and the invisible, flowing river of strangers passing through the city limits. Sherrill Levitt, Suzie Streeter, and Stacy McCall stood at the intersection of these two worlds. Sherrill, 47 years old, was a single mother, a hairdresser, and by all accounts, a survivor. She was described as street smart, a woman who had navigated a difficult past to build a stable, comfortable life at 1717 East Delmar Street. She was not a woman who would open her door to a stranger without cause. She was protective. The house itself was a symbol of her independence. Suzie and Stacy were 19 and 18, respectively. They were celebrating a rite of passage that is distinctly American: high school graduation. This cultural moment is significant. Graduation night creates a temporary suspension of social rules. It is a period of chaotic movement. Teenagers move in herds from house to house, from party to party. Schedules are fluid. Curfews are relaxed. Parents assume their children are sleeping at a friend's house. Friends assume they went home. This creates a window of time, a blind spot in the social contract, where a person can go missing for 12 to 18 hours before anyone realizes something is wrong. The timeline of the disappearance relies heavily on this chaotic movement. The girls were seen at multiple locations that night. They left a party in Battlefield, a smaller community nearby, at around 2 in the morning. They planned to stay at a friend's house, but changed their minds due to the overcrowding. They decided to return to Sherrill's home on East Delmar to sleep. This decision was spontaneous. It was not broadcast. Only a handful of people knew they were heading there. This suggests that whatever happened was either a crime of extreme opportunity or was perpetrated by someone who was tracking their movements in real time, physically following them through the dark streets of Springfield. Let us examine the physical space of 1717 East Delmar. The house was a single-story ranch, typical of the area. It sat on a corner lot. This is a crucial tactical detail. Corner lots offer visibility, but they also offer multiple avenues of approach and escape for an observer. The house was not isolated in the woods. It was in a residential neighborhood. There were neighbors on all sides, and yet silence. The forensic psychology of the scene inside the house is perhaps the most disturbing aspect of the case. When friends arrived the next morning, seeking Suzie and Stacy for a planned trip to a water park, they found the front door unlocked. The porch light was shattered, the glass bulb broken. This is the only sign of potential violence. Yet even this is ambiguous. Was it broken during a struggle? Or was it broken accidentally by the sweep of a hand? Inside, the house was immaculate. This is what detectives often refer to as a soft crime scene. There was no blood. There was no overturned furniture. Levitt's bed appeared slept in. The girl's bed appeared slept in. Their purses were all present. This detail requires a deep pause. In 1992, a woman's purse was her lifeline. It contained her identification, her money, her cigarettes, her keys. For 3 women to leave a house without their purses is psychologically inconsistent with voluntary departure. It suggests coercion, but the type of coercion is baffling. To control 3 women, one of whom was a protective mother, without a scream, without a struggle, without a shot fired, implies a weapon of overwhelming dominance, or a perpetrator known to the victims. Levitt's purse contained $800 in cash. Cigarettes, which she was known to never be without, were left sitting on the table. The family dog, a Yorkshire Terrier named Cinnamon, was found inside the house, agitated and trembling. The dog is a witness that cannot speak. A small dog-like that is usually an alarm system. If a stranger kicks in a door, the dog barks. If the dog knew the intruder, perhaps it did not. Or perhaps the intrusion was so swift and terrifying that the animal was cowed into submission instantly. Now we must discuss the technological tragedy of this case. The answering machine. In the early 90s, the answering machine was the primary repository of missed connections. It was a physical tape, a magnetic strip of evidence. While friends and family were searching the house, unknowingly contaminating the crime scene by cleaning up broken glass and moving items, the phone rang. It rang multiple times. Calls were answered. Calls were ignored. And in the chaos of concerned friends trying to figure out where Sherrill, Suzie, and Stacy were, a crucial error occurred. Someone listened to a message on the machine. The contents of this message are the subject of intense debate and speculation. Some reports claim it was a lewd, heavy-breathing prank call. Others suggest it was something more specific. But the tragedy is not just the content, it is the deletion. In the confusion, the message was erased. The magnetic data was overwritten. This inadvertent destruction of evidence is a hallmark of the era. Today, digital forensics could likely retrieve a deleted voicemail from a cloud server or a carrier's database. In 1992, once the tape rolled over, the voice was gone forever. We lost a ghost in the machine. Furthermore, the police were not called immediately. The initial assumption by friends was not abduction. It was simply that the women had left. Perhaps they went for breakfast. Perhaps they were running errands. The scene was walked through, touched, and altered for hours before law enforcement secured the perimeter. This is not maliciousness. It is the naivety of a pre-true crime culture. The idea that 3 women could simply evaporate from a suburban home was so alien, so impossible, that the human mind rejected it until it was undeniable. We must also look at the vehicle. Stacy McCall's car was still parked at the house. However, Suzie's car, a red Ford Escort, was also there. But police noted something strange about the placement of the vehicles. They were parked in the driveway, but the configuration was tight. There is also the element of the construction. Springfield in 1992 was expanding. Cox South Hospital, a major medical center, was under construction nearby. This has given rise to one of the most persistent and macabre theories surrounding the case: that the bodies were disposed of in the wet concrete of the hospital's parking garage. This theory aligns with the anxieties of the time, the idea that the rapid modernization and paving over of the natural world was literally burying the secrets of the past. While ground-penetrating radar has been used with inconclusive results, the theory persists because it speaks to the permanence of the disappearance. They became part of the city's infrastructure, hidden in plain sight. The cultural moment of 1992 also included a shifting view of criminal profiling. The FBI was beginning to understand that serial offenders often operate in zones of comfort. They hunt where they are familiar. The person who took the Springfield 3 knew the layout of the house. They knew the neighborhood. They likely knew that the darkness of the Ozark night would provide cover. There were other disappearances and murders in the region during this era. Unconnected incidents that paint a picture of a predatory undercurrent. But the Springfield 3 stands apart because of the volume. Taking one person is difficult. Taking 3 requires a level of control and logistics that suggests a sophisticated offender or multiple perpetrators. The police utilized every tool available to them at the time. They checked dental records. They distributed flyers. The show America's Most Wanted featured the case, beaming the faces of Sherrill, Suzie, and Stacy into living rooms across the nation. Thousands of leads were generated. Sightings of a green van were reported, a classic, almost archetypal element of abduction lore. But the vehicle was never found. We are left with a series of static images. The broken globe on the porch, the trembling dog, the lined-up purses, the unmade beds. The context of this mystery is defined by what is missing. The missing technology that could have tracked them. The missing visual evidence from doorbell cameras that did not exist. The missing message on the answering machine. And the missing women who stepped out of the warm, humid air of a Missouri June and into a void that has refused to give them back for over 3 decades. This was not just a crime against 3 individuals. It was a rupture in the reality of Springfield. It shattered the illusion that the American heartland was a fortress against the darkness. It proved that even in a house full of people, on a night of celebration, you could be swallowed whole. In part 3, we will examine the suspects, the theories, and the investigative dead ends that have kept this wound open. But for now, we linger in the house on East Delmar, listening to the silence of the telephone. Part 3, the investigation. The transition from a missing persons case to a homicide investigation is rarely a distinct line. It is a gradient, a slow darkening of the spectrum as minutes turn into hours and hours calcify into years. In the case of the Springfield 3, that gradient began the moment the first officer stepped onto the porch of 1717 East Delmar Street. From a forensic standpoint, the investigation began at a deficit. We must look at this clinically. The crime scene was not preserved in amber. It was porous. Before law enforcement arrived, well-meaning friends and family had swept the broken glass of the porch light. They had washed dishes. They had walked across the carpets. The timeline of the investigation is haunted by the phantom movements of people who were simply trying to help. Unaware they were erasing the only story the house had left to tell. The police reports from the first 48 hours describe a chaotic influx of data. The Springfield Police Department was immediately overwhelmed by the sheer absence of evidence. There was no blood. There were no signs of a forced entry beyond the globe of the porch light. The purses were sitting in a row. The cigarettes were unsmoked. This brings us to the first major piece of lost media in this case, a detail that has obsessed forum dwellers for decades: the answering machine. In 1992, the answering machine was a physical repository of time and voice. Witnesses claim that upon arriving at the house, they listened to a message. It was described as strange, perhaps obscene, perhaps simply heavy breathing. In the confusion of the morning, this message was inadvertently deleted. It was overwritten by the incoming calls of worried parents. that deleted magnetic tape is a void in the narrative. Was it the perpetrator taunting the family? Was it a prank call unrelated to the abduction? Or was it simply the static of a misdial? We will never know. It is a piece of audio evidence that exists only in the memory of those who heard it. And memory is a notoriously degrading storage format. As the weeks passed, the investigation fanned out into a series of concentric circles. The local police, the FBI, and eventually the public began to construct theories. These theories, preserved in scanned newspapers and archived HTML pages, represent the desperate human need to find a pattern in the chaos. The first prevailing theory focused on the green van. Witnesses reported seeing a 1960s or 70s Dodge van in the area. It was described as having no side windows. To a digital archaeologist, the green van is a recurring motif in criminal folklore, often representing the archetypal abduction vehicle. However, in this case, the sightings were consistent enough to generate composite sketches. The police followed thousands of leads regarding green vans. They checked registrations, scrapyards, and back roads. The van, like the women, seemed to have evaporated. Then the investigation turned toward specific individuals. We must discuss Robert Cox. In the annals of this case, Cox appears as a figure of high strangeness and malevolence. He was a convicted kidnapper living in Springfield at the time. He had served time in Florida and California. His presence in the narrative is defined by his own words. Years after the disappearance, while incarcerated for other crimes, Cox began to speak to journalists and investigators. He claimed to know where the women were buried. He claimed they would never be found. He taunted the authorities with the arrogance of a man who believed he had outsmarted the system. However, the police could never physically link him to the house on Delmar Street. His girlfriend at the time provided an alibi, though she later recanted it, stating she had lied to protect him. Cox remains the primary suspect in the eyes of many online investigators, a man who fits the profile of a predatory drifter. Yet, without physical evidence, he remains a ghost in the machine, a name in a file that cannot be closed. There is another theory, one that moves away from the transient predator and toward the local criminal element. This theory involves Gerald Carnahan, a local businessman with a history of violence. Carnahan was eventually convicted for the murder of another woman, Jackie Johns, in a case that utilized advanced DNA phenotyping years later. While Carnahan was a known entity to Springfield police, no biological evidence placed him at the Levitt home. He represents the banality of evil, a man known to the community, operating in plain sight. But the most enduring, and perhaps the most disturbing theory, lies not with a person, but with a place. This brings us to the concept of liminal spaces and the urban legends that grow around them. The parking garage theory. In 2007, a teepster provided information to a crime reporter, suggesting that the bodies of Sherrill, Suzie, and Stacy were buried beneath the concrete of a parking garage at Cox Hospital. The hospital was under construction in 1992. The theory posits that the perpetrator disposed of the bodies in the foundation shortly before the concrete was poured. This theory ignited the internet. It was a puzzle that could be visualized. Amateur sleuths overlaid blueprints with satellite imagery. They studied the pouring schedules of the construction crews in 1992. In 2010, a mechanical engineer hired by a private party used ground-penetrating radar on the site. The radar pinged. It showed 3 anomalies consistent with graves. The image of those 3 anomalies, glowing faintly on a scanner screen, is one of the most haunting digital artifacts of this case. It offers a solution that is both concrete and inaccessible. The police deemed the evidence insufficient to justify the enormous cost and structural risk of excavating a functioning hospital garage. The anomalies remain there, beneath the tires of parked cars, beneath the feet of patients and doctors. Whether they are bodies or construction debris is a question suspended in bureaucracy. This leads us to the digital archaeology of the Springfield 3. Why does this case persist with such intensity in the digital realm? If you navigate to the early forums, the archived threads from the late 90s and early 2000s, you see the evolution of internet investigation. You see the transition from newspaper clippings to JPEG scans to YouTube analysis videos. The internet has become the external hard drive for the community's grief. On sites like Web Sleuths and Reddit, the case is subjected to endless cycles of re-examination. Users enhance the grainy photos of the crime scene. They stabilize the news footage. They track the genealogy of suspects. This is a form of digital vigil for the missing. It is an attempt to use the logic of algorithms and data points to solve a crime that was likely born of irrational impulse. However, the digital footprint also reveals why the case remains unsolved. The noise-to-signal ratio is deafening. For every legitimate lead, there are 100 psychics, trolls, and well-meaning, but misguided speculators. The investigation was hampered in 1992 by a lack of physical evidence, and it is hampered today by an excess of digital noise. The police files, now thousands of pages thick, tell a story of exhaustion. They interviewed the ex-boyfriends. They interviewed the grave robbers. They interviewed the transient population living under the bridges of the Ozarks. They utilized every tool available to law enforcement in the 20th century. The failure to solve the Springfield 3 is not a failure of effort. It is a failure of the exchange. In almost every homicide, there is an exchange, a struggle, a weapon left behind, a hair, a fiber. The perpetrator takes a life, but leaves a piece of themselves. In this case, the exchange was entirely one-sided. The perpetrator took 3 women, a dog, and the piece of a community, and left nothing but a broken porch light and a silence that has lasted for over 30 years. The digital archaeologist looks at this and sees a data corruption, a file that was opened but never closed. The women are suspended in the liminal space between the party and the morning after. They are forever 19 and 47. They are forever driving the red and white cars. As we move toward the final analysis, we must confront the reality that the answers may not lie in the police reports or the radar scans. They may simply be gone, dissolved into the entropy of the Missouri landscape. But the internet does not forget. The servers hum, keeping the names Sherrill, Suzie, and Stacy in the present tense. The investigation is technically cold, but digitally, it is overheating. End of part 3. Part 4. The aftermath. Time is an abrasive force. It acts like sand against stone, smoothing over sharp edges, eroding details, and eventually burying structures entirely. In the world of cold cases, time is usually the enemy. It degrades DNA, it clouds witness memories, and it allows perpetrators to slip away into the anonymity of old age or death. But in the case of the Springfield 3, time has done something stranger. It has calcified the mystery. It has turned a missing persons case into a piece of modern American folklore, suspending Sherrill Levitt, Suzie Streeter, and Stacy McCall in a perpetual state of liminality. They are neither confirmed dead nor truly alive. They exist now as data points, as pixels on a screen, and as a haunting absence that hangs over the Ozarks like the humidity of a Missouri summer. To understand the legacy of June 7th, 1992, we must first look at the physical anchor of this event: the house at 1717 East Delmar Street. If you were to open a browser tab right now and navigate to a satellite view of Springfield, Missouri, you could float down from the stratosphere and hover over the address. The digital rendering of the neighborhood is bright and high definition. The trees are full and green. The lawns are manicured. The house itself has changed ownership multiple times. It has been repainted. The landscaping has been altered. To the casual observer driving past, it is simply another single-story home in a quiet, working-class subdivision. However, for those of us who sift through the archives of the unexplained, this location possesses a heavy, static charge. It is a monument to a glitch in reality. In the years immediately following the disappearance, the house became a focal point for a community grappling with a collective loss of innocence. Before 1992, Springfield felt insulated from the predations of the wider world. It was a place where doors were left unlocked and keys were left in ignitions. The vanishing of 3 women from a single home, without a struggle, without a sound, shattered that illusion. The house stood empty for a time, a hollow shell containing the memories of a graduation party, a dog named Cinnamon, and a life interrupted. The media coverage at the time was frantic, but analog. It existed in newspapers, on local broadcast news, and on flyers stapled to telephone poles. As the 90s progressed into the 2000s, the case migrated from the physical world to the digital one. This transition is where the nature of the mystery began to shift. On the internet, the Springfield 3 ceased to be solely a police investigation and became an obsession for the amateur sleuth community. Forums like Web Sleuths and Reddit became the new town square. Here, users dissect the same limited set of facts with clinical precision. They analyze the timeline of the graduation night. They enhance the grainy scans of crime scene photos. They debate the physics of the broken porch light bulb. This digitization of the tragedy has preserved it, but it has also corrupted it. The images of Suzie and Stacy in their graduation gowns, and Sherrill with her short blonde hair, have been copied, compressed, and re-uploaded so many times that they have begun to degrade. The JPEG artifacts in the images look like digital ghosts. We see their smiles through a haze of pixelation. They are frozen in 1992, forever young, forever unaware of the fate rushing toward them. One of the most persistent and disturbing elements of the aftermath is the theory surrounding the Cox Hospital parking garage. This theory exemplifies how a rumor can harden into a legend. In 2007, a teepster claimed that the 3 women were buried beneath the concrete of a parking garage that was under construction at the hospital during the time of the disappearance. The tip was specific, stating that their bodies were placed in the loose earth before the concrete was poured. This led to a surreal investigation involving ground-penetrating radar. Rick Norland, a mechanical engineer, scanned the area. He found 3 anomalies, 3 distinct shapes, roughly the size of human bodies, buried beneath the surface. The data was compelling. It was scientific. It offered a horrifying, claustrophobic answer to the question of where they went. They were, theoretically, part of the city's infrastructure now. But the site was never excavated. The police stated that the anomalies could be anything: old construction debris, root systems, or geological variances. They argued that the concrete core samples proved the structure was sound, and that the timeline of the pour did not match the disappearance. The cost of tearing up a functioning hospital parking garage was deemed prohibitive without more concrete evidence. So the anomalies remain. This detail creates a profound sense of unease. Thousands of people park their cars there every year. They walk over that concrete to visit sick relatives or to go to work, potentially stepping over the final resting place of the Springfield 3. It is a concept that feels less like a police procedural and more like a piece of dark fiction. It suggests that the missing are not far away, but rather just beneath the surface of our daily lives, encased in stone, waiting. Then there is the matter of the answering machine. In the lore of this case, the inadvertent deletion of the message on Sherrill Levitt's answering machine is the ultimate corruption of data. It is the lost file that might have solved the system crash. We know that someone called the house on the morning of June 7th. We know that the message contained lewd or strange comments. We know that in the chaos of the initial discovery, amidst the ringing phones and the panic of friends and family, the message was listened to and then erased. That erasure is a wound that will never heal. It represents the fragility of evidence. In an era before cloud backups and digital voicemails, a single button press destroyed the only potential audio link to the perpetrator. We are left to wonder what that voice sounded like. Was it a prank? Was it the killer taunting them? Or was it something else entirely? The silence left in the wake of that deleted message is deafening. The human toll of this aftermath cannot be overstated. For the families left behind, particularly Janice McCall, Stacy's mother, the lack of resolution is a torture that endures for decades. Janice became a figure of immense strength, founding an organization to help other families of missing persons. But the legal realities of the case forced painful decisions. In 1997, 5 years after the disappearance, Sherrill and Suzie were declared legally dead. But Janice fought against declaring Stacy dead for years. To sign that paper is to admit that the search is over. It is a bureaucratic surrender to the void. The tension between the legal status of dead and the emotional reality of missing is a chasm that the families must navigate every single day. As we view the case today, the media landscape is littered with recycled content. Podcasts retell the story, often hitting the same beats, analyzing the same few clues. The broken globe on the porch light, the television left on static, the sheer lack of forensic evidence. The story loops. It has become a closed circuit. We must ask ourselves what questions remain unanswered, not because we lack theories, but because we lack the key to unlock the data. Who was the man in the green van seen in the neighborhood? Why was the dog, Cinnamon, so agitated? How did 3 adults leave a house with a single narrow door without waking the neighbors or causing a scene? Was it a targeted attack on Suzie, stemming from her testimony in past legal matters? Or was it a crime of random, chaotic opportunity? The most haunting question, however, is not who or how, but where. The Ozarks are vast. The geography of Missouri is filled with caves, sinkholes, dense forests, and deep lakes. It is a landscape that can swallow secrets. If they are not under the parking garage, they could be anywhere in that sprawling topography. The earth has reclaimed them. This brings us to the philosophical nature of the unknown. There is a concept in psychology called ambiguous loss. It occurs when a closure is impossible. It is a state of suspended grief. The Springfield Three inhabit this space. They are not memories, because memories imply a past tense. They are an ongoing event. The disappearance is not something that happened in 1992. It is something that is still happening right now. Every moment they are not found is a continuation of the crime. In the digital age, we have convinced ourselves that everything is knowable. We believe that with enough data, enough surveillance, and enough connectivity, we can illuminate every dark corner of the world. We think that there are no more secrets. The Springfield Three stand in defiance of that arrogance. They remind us that people can still simply vanish. They remind us that the systems we trust, locks, alarms, communities, police, are porous. As we look at the archived photographs one last time, staring into the grainy eyes of three women who stepped out of time, we are forced to confront a terrifying reality. The world is not as solid as we think it is. There are cracks in the pavement. There are silences on the tape. And sometimes, when the porch light breaks and the darkness rushes in, it never recedes. They are still out there, somewhere, suspended in the amber of 1992. And until the earth gives them up, or the silence is broken, they will remain the ghosts in the machine, waiting for a signal that may never come. This concludes the file on the Springfield Three. The system is now closing,